Kind of Funny Live 2 is happening May 28th and 29th. It's a 2-day event. The first day is going to be a completely ridiculous stage show. What we have planned this year completely blows last year out of the water. And I don't even know how that's possible because we were really stupid last year, and this year's somehow even stupider. Day 2, it's going to be full day of meet and greets. We're hanging out with all of us. A bunch of Rooster Teeth people are there. Funhouse people are there. Achievement Hunter. It's going to be a grand old time. There's going to be some games to play. There's going to be signings. It's exciting. It's a really fun time. There's going to be exclusive merch. Oh yeah, there's definitely going to be exclusive merch. Go to kindoffunny.com/tickets to get your tickets today. There's a couple VIP tickets still available, so make sure if you want one of those, you act fast. Second topic of the day, Colin. I want to talk about Resident Evil. You got some shit for me.
Yeah, well, so there was just a passing mention in Capcom's financials that they were planning something with Resident Evil. At least that's what people have been reading into it. So what they basically said in you know, kind of short and it wasn't very long what they said to begin with was they have a full-fledged offensive for Resident Evil planned for the second half of the year. And what a lot of people are reading into that is that they're going to announce and or release the game, Resident Evil 7 or a new Resident Evil game. Greg and I both think it's not going to be Resident Evil 7. It'll be like a reboot. But we'll see like what ends up happening. And that brought, you know, this makes sense because Capcom has been messing around with Resident Evil for a while now. Like Resident Evil 6 was very lukewarmly both critically and commercially with lukewarm reception. Resident Evil 5 less so, but wasn't really a Resident Evil game. People really look back at Resident Evil 4 as the last true Resident Evil game. Survival horror Resident Evil game. And, you know, they released Remake HD last year, a little before this time. It was probably like 14 or 15 months ago. And then they released Resident Evil 0 HD. And then they announced that they're going to remake Resident Evil 2. And then they re-released Resident Evil 6 on current-gen platforms. And then they're going to release Resident Evil 5 on platforms. And that's all going to culminate with Resident Evil 4 coming to these platforms, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And Resident Evil 4 was already released on PS3 and Xbox 360. It's not a huge deal, but they're going to have some upgraded controls and all these kinds of things. Yeah. And so what this brought to mind for me was I have actually a soft spot for survival horror. I just don't think it's done very well anymore. And so I was wondering like what we want this new Resident Evil game to be and what aspects of survival horror are most important. Because I think that if anything's clear about 5 and 6, Resident Evil 5 and 6, it's that they're not survival horror games by any stretch of the imagination. There's no ammo scarcity. There's way too many enemies. There's not many like even trite jump scares and stuff like that, but it's not contained and confined and eerie. And those are the hallmarks of the genre to me. So I'm just kind of curious what you guys want this new Resident Evil game to be. And if you're even fans of Biohazard at all, because I don't know that.
No, I definitely, I mean, the original ones, obviously I was like hugely into, and they were something so special back then. And I think that, you know, they don't exactly hold up nowadays, like the remake on GameCube and then now that they remade or whatever. It's just the controls are wonky, you know what I mean? But that is kind of what made those games feel so tense and scary. I feel like 4 was a natural progression forward for that. And, you know, as games evolve and as things get more modernized, it gets harder and harder to have novel ideas and to scare you and stuff. I think Dead Space, for me, is the clear best example of what survival horror could be on a next-gen console. Well, now next-gen is last-gen. So what does it need to do now to kind of make you feel that way? I think along the way, Resident Evil became such a big franchise and such a big... Everybody knew what Resident Evil was, that it had to keep evolving because it couldn't just be, all right, mansion, city... You know, it just kept like getting bigger and bigger. And it's like kind of like when you look at Mario, it's like you go from Mario World, Mario Galaxy, what's next? And it's like you need to feel this sense of progression. And it hit a point in the early 2000s, probably when the movies started coming out. Well, Resident Evil was action. It just became action. And that's how you make things bigger. It's just action. And it's like those movies performed so well. I'm sure that influenced the games because shooters are starting to get big. Call of Duty's huge, all this stuff. It's like it became more of a shooter game because people buy shooter games. They don't buy survival horror games anymore. They were novel back then. They're not novel anymore.
Right.
So what do I want from it? I think I want a smaller game that's not a fully fledged AAA game. And I think Capcom wouldn't do that. I think they'd be too scared to do that with Resident Evil, but I think it's a smart call to go back to the roots of it being more contained in a house. I would love it if it was a reboot, capital RE boot, and it was really kind of just, you know, taking the first couple games and giving us a best of, but what that might look like in 2016, in the same way that we've seen kind of reimagined, like almost like a Shovel Knight take on Resident Evil, but of its own franchise. You know, it's kind of like Tomb Raider, where it took the concepts of the other ones, but it's totally different.
Sure.
But that's what a modernized thing looks like, and it's a good call. I think that this could do that somewhere in between Tomb Raider and Tomb Raider Go, which are two drastically different games, but somewhere in there, it grasps the essence of what we remember Tomb Raider being. That's what I think Resident Evil needs to do for us to play something that makes us remember the feeling of playing Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I want it to be limited ammo. I want fluid controls, and I want it to be a narrative linear experience. I don't want it to be crazy. Like, it's what you're saying. I want it to be AAA. I want people to do it, but I mean, imagine like a Naughty Dog Resident Evil, you know what I mean, on that kind of thing, where we're telling you a specific story and there's stuff happening, you can go around and do it. But my problems with it always were like, I always talk about, on paper, I should love Resident Evil. I should be its biggest fan. Zombie movies are my thing. I fucking love video games. When this came out, I remember being like, and I've been talking about when it came out on PlayStation, I was like, holy shit, yes. And sat down and tried to play it. I was like, oh my God, I cannot even control the character. This is frustrating. And I never ever got over it and couldn't do it. And on GameCube, I went ahead my GameCube, I played the remake. I was like, okay. And 4 I played, but by then 4 was deviating for me, right? What I want them to do is I want this to be a zombie game. I do not want it to do the zombie shit they do where it evolves into lickers and giant monsters and everything else. I want it to be, there's been a zombie outbreak and we're trying to contain it. And how does this all spiral out? And there's intrigue and story and characters that make sense, and Wesker's back or whatever, but he's a new Wesker because it's a reboot, and his motivations make sense and I understand where we're going with it. I feel like that's Resident Evil as we know it didn't control well. The story got fucking crazy all the time, and like, well, I was talking about it with, we were talking about this earlier, Colin and I, of like, for me with 4 and remake, well, I mean, one of my problems with it was like just that they had the zombie rules, but even with the controls there, where it's like I'd shoot a zombie in the head and it didn't necessarily go down. It's like, well, come the fuck on. Like, what is going? And granted, some of that's camera angle. I forget what was it? There's like a roll where sometimes you can't pop a headshot and blow up the head on one hit, but it's not every time. It's like I want to be in that zombie universe that way. But if we're rebooting it, controls, good story, limited ammo, and honestly, I'd want a protagonist that isn't a badass. That, you know what I mean? I want it to be Isaac Clarke, Dead Space 1, and not Leon Kennedy, Resident Evil 4. And then as you saw with 5 and 6, right? These people continue to get even more muscular and better and fucking roundhouse kicks and stabbing and shit. Like, that was what we always talk about with Dead Space and why it was like so scary, right? Is the fact that I'm just an engineer. Holy fuck, what do I do? And I'm augmenting my guns that should be used to fix this ship to shoot the fucking limbs off of things. And everything that came at me was terrifying. And it didn't matter that it wasn't waves and waves of people. And when we started getting into, as much as I liked Resident Evil 4, I didn't love it, but I liked Resident Evil 4. There still were like the armies of the villagers that came at you, and it's like, but I still feel, except for the controls, that I was in power. Like, I was Leon Kennedy. He's not scared, and I got to fucking shove this girl in the goddamn dumpster and then run over there and do this. But that's what I want. If we're trying to make it a real survival horror game, which I think they should, because I think, again, that would be novel in a way to go back to that now, especially because not many people are doing it. And we see with games like Outlast and Layers of Fear and another big one I'm forgetting, Slender? No, whatever. That people want to be scared again. Soma. People want to be scared by games again. And so if you came out and actually made a real zombie game and, again, kept it simple but made it work.
Yeah, I think the narrative thing is the main thing that you're hitting on that separates Resident Evil from those other ones. Like the other one, they all have stories, but I do think that, Resident Evil, people remember Resident Evil 1 as being a story-based game. Whether or not it's a great story,
you were almost a Jill sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, it had some poor writing, but I think that overall, like, the story was intriguing for the time, and I do think that they have.
Yeah.
But the setting, the mansion, the Wesker, and all, I love everything you're saying about the intrigue and stuff, and keeping it zombies and not crazy shit. There's definitely a cool story to be told.
I think the one thing I disagree with Greg is like the linearity. Like, one of the hallmarks I think of survival horror is non-linearity. I can't think of a survival horror game that is linear. That like. Even going back to Sweet Home and stuff like that, but like, a game where you really don't know what you're supposed to do. That's part of to me, it's part of the intrigue. Like going around the mansion in Resident Evil or in Remake HD, it's all the same. you don't really know what you're supposed to do. You keep like encountering these locked doors. You're like progressing, and there's like weirdness. I was talking, I think, on Colin and Greg or somewhere with the like when you're upstairs on the balcony that first time and you see the zombie walking in front of you, like, but you can't get to him or whatever. And it's like there's like weird shit like that because you're walking around and you're not really quite sure what you're supposed to do. And I think that specifically was the hallmark of Dead Space and the Ishimura. Was I think we're all talking about the same thing. It's a confined space that you are backtracking through over and over again, which I think is awesome. And things change, and if you pay attention, there's subtle differences, and that was certainly the case in Dead Space, and that's the case in Resident Evil as well in the original one. Not so much in Resident Evil 4 because it's way more open, but I still think is like one of the like that game, because it dared to be what it was. I think it gets away with it or whatever. It's actually wide open when you really look at the environments, the town and the Puget Lake and all these kinds of things. Like, this is cool. It has like almost like a Jason kind of feel to it in a way. And like so to me, I feel like this particular one game that I feel like is not survival horror, but I look at it as having many of the hallmarks of survival horror, and I'm not even sure that the creators would call it that, is BioShock. And I think that survival horror games can learn a great deal from that. Rapture is a perfect setting. It's probably a better setting than even the Ishimura or the Mansion, because it's so big that it's fucking creepy because you're alone.
Yeah, so empty.
And so you're alone except for the big daddies and the little sisters and like some of the splicers, but you're pretty much alone. And so I want to see some sort of fusion of those kinds of things. But if in terms of like Biohazard, in terms of Resident Evil, like what I really want from it, being a fan of the series, or an old fan of the series, not so much anymore, is something maybe more akin to a fusion of 4 and Dead Space. You need to give people more than a mansion today, I think. I don't know that you can get away with that anymore because it's going to be short. And like, how do you really fuck around with that? You can give them a castle like Castlevania that's fucking comically big, but if you want to keep it like realistic, then I think that you maybe a village or some sort of abandoned nuclear site or abandoned military base or something cool like that.
Small town that's like walled in by water and bluffs.
Similar to, what the fuck was that weird Japanese game that took place in the town? It was Deadly Premonition.
Okay.
So like similar, so like Deadly Premonition, I played Deadly Premonition when it came into PS3. And I was like, this game is low budget and comically bad. Mm-hmm. But there's something about this game. Like, there definitely is something about this game because everything is weird. It's just weird. There's people working in the store. There are people in the houses, but there's something weird about this town. Very like classic kind of, it's like Children of the Corn kind of in that sense, like where there's like something weird about this geographical area, not just this place. But I'd love to see it take place on like a military base or something where like you can explore different buildings and kind of go around and figure things out, and things are locked and you need key cards or it can be like something very modern. Like I think about Parasite Eve. Like the cool thing about Parasite Eve was that it was super modern, and like Resident Evil was always modern as well, but like could it take place in a city, in a skyscraper? Could it take place, like be clever with it? Mm-hmm. And the weird thing about Resident Evil 5 and 6 to me, I didn't play 6. I refused to play 6 because 5 was so disappointing to me, and that's where I get with franchises I love, where I'm like, I've seen enough.
Take my stand.
Is they made a mistake. Capcom made a mistake with Resident Evil 5, thinking that they needed to respond to the way where the market was, when they didn't realize that particular IP is what everyone responds to. And Dead Space is a response to it. Dead Space is definitely a response to Resident Evil.
Sure.
Outlast is a response to the feel of Resident Evil, the scariness. It's not the same perspective. You don't have weapons and all that kind of stuff, but it's definitely that tenseness. And what they need to do is figure out that they already knew what they were doing and they didn't need to change anything at all. And that what they should pay attention to is the market response to Resident Evil 6. Make a survival horror game. Again, bullet scarcity. I would love for them to bring ink ribbons back. I fucking loved that.
Oh, I hate that shit.
Like I think like making the game part of what survival horror, was cool about the early Resident Evil games was that they were fucking hard. Like you could beat through the game, but if you ratcheted up the difficulty level and you didn't use your ink ribbons and all that kind of stuff, like I love the idea of being like, you can't save. Sorry. Like if you die,
that's fine as an option, but that's not how I want to play.
I loved that. Like I thought it was a unique. They didn't have to do that. Like that wasn't a limitation of save slots or RAM or anything. Like they were just like, no, fuck you. You can't save and I'm like, that's awesome because it makes you careful. I think one of the things we've lost in games is consequences. I was thinking about that when I was playing Alienation recently, which is a great Housemarque game, but there are no consequences for dying at all. And I love the idea of like, you have 7 ink ribbons you can save 7 times. You better figure out exactly how you want to do it because that's all. And by the way, you have to find them. You're not going to start with them. So good luck finding them Good luck finding your herbs and your bullets. You have 6 bullets in your gun. You have a fucking herb and a spray can of first aid, and you have no idea what's laying ahead.
Herbs.
That is the tenseness. That's something actually even Dead Space lost sight of, I think. And that was, even though I think Dead Space is actually better than any Resident Evil game. So I think that there's a lot of promise. There's a lot to be excited about because I think they finally get it. I think that they totally get it. And I think that the way that they're releasing these games, even 6 and 5, is foreshadowing a big announcement. And I do think that Resident Evil will be announced, and I think it will come out in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds. I'm with you on that. I think that's kind of necessary for them at this point, like without it getting too far out from everything. I want to give a shout out to Fatal Frame 2.
Oh, Fatal Frame
played that at all, but like Fatal Frame 1 was fine, but Fatal Frame 2, I thought they really nailed it, and like that game made me feel scared of playing it in the same way that the original Resident Evil did. Granted, when I played Resident Evil the first time, I was like 7. So like it was extremely scary. Sure. But Fatal Frame 2, man, it really nailed it. Came out, or at least I played it around the time that like The Ring and The Grudge and all the Japanese horror movies were making their way to America, and it had that whole, there's the twins, and there's something creepy about twins.
Yeah, twins.
You know?
Yeah, going back to The Shining.
And yeah, exactly. Like there's just that game really kind of nailed the whole thing of making you being scared of physically playing it, and like the use of the rumble in the controller I thought was really, really unique and interesting and scary. And I think that the gimmick that game put forward with the camera and like only seeing the ghost when you pull up the camera, like there's something about limiting your view and only being able to see things at certain times that like really does add to the fear. And that's why Resident Evil has the camera, you know.
And that's why Outlast, I think, really nails it too, like with
the lighting of the video camera. So it's like I think that it needs that. It needs some gimmick that works to keep that feeling going. And again, like what I was saying about the AAA thing is like, I do feel like I want a shorter game. I want it to be a tighter narrative experience that might be like a B game. I miss the B games, and I want the B games to come back. And I feel like a really solid 7 to 8 hour Resident Evil is going to go a lot farther for me than a 20-hour game with like an intense amount of backtracking, whatever. Even if there was a lot of backtracking in this, if it was in a smaller space that you do get more intimately familiar with, like I'm all for that. So we'll see.
I hope they take some cues from Gremlins 2 and make
all of them
some fruit zombies and electricity zombies, but no liquors. A smart zombie that we call Brain.
Smart zombie.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I played Resident Evil was at Kevin's uncle's house.
Didn't he scare you guys?
And Kevin's uncle tried to scare us because he's a fucking asshole. Goddamn.
Because if you were 7, like what? Kevin was 6?
Kevin was 6, yeah. And my brother was 4. And yeah, he was like, "Oh, let me show you this game."
So much.
We just played Izzy's Magical Ring Quest on the Super Nintendo. It was an Olympic game. It was a platformer. Yeah. We're having fucking time of our life. And he's like, "Let me show you some real shit." He pulls that out as soon as Kevin's mom leaves us with him. He's like, "Let me show you some real shit." And it was like 9 p.m. dark outside. I couldn't sleep at all. You know what could have helped me sleep though? Casper mattresses. Thank you so much for sponsoring this topic. The Casper is an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. It combines springy latex and supportive memory foams to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and just the right amount of bounce.
Yeah.
Time magazine named it one of the best inventions of 2015.
Damn.
That's a damn fact, Greg. In fact, it's now the most awarded mattress of the decade. Good for you, Casper.
Go get him, Casper.
Damn. Free shipping and returns to the US and Canada. Try Casper for 100 nights risk-free in your own home. If you don't love it, they'll pick it right back up and refund you everything. You know why, Colin? Because it was made in America. And that's how we do things here.
Damn straight. We're Make America Great Again.
Yep, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. You can get $50 towards any mattress by purchasing at Casper.com/KFGames using code KFGames. Again, go to Casper.com/KFGames. Use the promo code KFGames. Get your $50 off their award-winning, invention-driven mattress.
I love to think of our fans buying mattresses and then fucking on them.
Me too. Good for them.
You know what I mean?
Good for them.
Yeah, go for it, you guys. Get a new mattress and then just bang out on it.
Making a note here.
Colin, you ever bang out on a mattress?
No. I don't know that's how you did it.
Surprisingly, no.
All right. So